Good evening, everybody. I am John O'Loughlin, and this is my channel. It's called McDuff Lives 2, and tonight it's Tuesday night. We are so glad to have Bill Taylor joining us tonight for another regular update. And Bill, how are you tonight?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Oh, I can't complain. I can't complain. I can't complain like neighborhood news hours can complain. They had 3 channels taken down by YouTube today. This is getting very, very serious. The censorship is real. I'm feeling it. I've got a second. I got a strike for nothing. They said I was promoting violent content. There was no violent content. There was no promotion of violent content. It was just some random hit that they took me down for my second one. So now I'm on like double secret probation, and if I got another one, they'll take all my whole 400 videos down, like they did to me the last time when they took 900 videos down. And the damnedest thing is that I keep going back to YouTube because YouTube hits 10,000 people for every 10 people you get on some other small platform. So it's
Right.
almost impossible to have a platform other than YouTube and survive. And I don't mean survive financially. I mean survive psychically, that you're actually communicating with people, and it's worth doing what you're doing. They're trying to drive us out of our venues and our ability to say what's on our mind. They don't like free speech, Bill.
No, they're against free speech. I mean, the YouTube is. I've been watching a lot more content on Rumble. It's you know what? I set up YouTube. It works nicely as far as finding the people that I want to listen to, but they're disappearing as well. So I do catch them on Rumble. I think Rumble is the whole platform is improving. At least the searches are. Uh, there should be somebody should do a YouTube show on how to use Rumble effectively, because I'm
Do they
not
do
completely
that?
sure myself.
Can you go live on Rumble?
I don't know. I think you can actually, but I don't. I don't know
Yeah,
the
that's the
basic.
trouble with BitChute. The only backup I have, and Catherine, Jumping Mouse, our dear volunteer webmaster and scheduler, and I wish I had a better title than that, because she should have some high and lofty title for all she does. But she sets up the web page for us, and she does all the scheduling, and anyway, it's it's crazy right now, and I'm just grateful to have the support that we have from Andy at Neighborhood News Hour, and from Catherine, who's working out of her home office. Putting in a couple hours every day to make sure that the website's running and everything is good. So I'm just really grateful for the help, but I am also feeling the heat.
No, definitely. But it just as a matter of necessity. I think some of the other channels are coming along, and I know some of the bigger content providers are, or at least putting their backups on different platforms. Like Bongino, uh, he's a big YouTuber, but he's got his stuff backed up on Rumble. And then, quite frankly, is another person I watch, and he will make an effort to maybe do the first 10 minutes on YouTube and then have everybody switch to other platforms, because he's lost. He's had things removed, so trying to acclimate the masses to move to something else. Um, you know,
Yeah,
it's like my parents say they didn't get cable until probably 1992, because over the air
yeah,
antenna TV was fine.
yeah, yeah. It was fine, if you wanted to watch, Channel 5, Channel 4, or Channel 9.
Right.
Your pick. Oh boy. I don't know, man. But looking more particularly at your situation now in New Jersey, you've got a governor that is really, really driving home the program, being very, very pro deep state, anti free speech, and goes along with everything that the quote unquote medical establishment, if that's a fair term, throws at us. Um, wh- how are you doing up there? I mean, I also have, New Jersey's not far from me. I've performed many times in New Jersey, and I actually was offered a role up there this fall, but I declined it because I thought that they're not going to let me sing. I'm not going to tell them my medical information, so the stage manager's not going to let me on stage. So forget about it. That's what I hate, is just the idea that we can't perform because
Right.
we're supposed to wear a stupid mask, or we've got to show them our vax card or something.
Right.
I'm,
Right.
this is you know, well,
It,
if I
I,
u-
it,
if I say what it is, I'll get another strike.
right. Well, I mean, there's a couple of ways of looking at it. It's almost to the point, especially here in New Jersey. Right, New Jersey is very complacent, as I've said before. Um, if somebody in uniform told you to put your kids on the train, okay, but half the parents in this state would do it. They would just comply because the guy has a clipboard and he has a uniform.
Mm.
They know the people who think about it don't really appreciate that comparison. Um, it's interesting what happened, and this is sort of related with Fauci this week, in that some people finally woke up to the fact that he's a bad dude because he's testing medical procedures or you know, testing medical devices or whatever he was diseases on beagles, and you could hurt the children, uh, but you're not going to hurt my dog. And actually, it was actually very encouraging, in that people are really starting to get angry, even these sort of Fauci worshippers. It's a very difficult thing for them to comprehend that their hero is also a dog torturer, um, and I think that's helped. But along those lines, you have Murphy. It's almost to the point, and this is maybe I'm skipping way ahead here, but it's almost to the point where Murphy's doing things to, and he seems to be pretty isolated, except for some other states. But he's almost to the point where he's trying to encourage rebellion. He's trying to encourage people to stand up and really get angry, and not necessarily angry in a way that would benefit the deep state or those forces, but more of a way to wake people up to the fact that really there are tyrants still around and they're still trying to run things, and we're just waiting for the the normies or the plebiscite to give the okay to take out these tyrants. And I say not necessarily for the deep state or NWO, in that we're seeing all kinds of. I like to follow my Twitter feed the Italian protests and the French protests in France. They had the Swiss are all, and the Swiss don't really protest about too much. The French will protest at the drop of a hat, but the Swiss are really not that active. And I would thinking if there was a larger deep state plan to maybe provoke violence and call us all insurrectionists and white supremacists and terrorists, then they would be showing those videos on CNN and MSNBC and our media 24/7, sort of as an encouragement to to take up arms and get angry and take it out on the government. But they're not. These they're protesting in Italy and France almost 24/7, and they're the mainstream media is really making an effort to keep those protests hidden. You have to go to Twitter and the other online sources to find out what's going on. If it was part of the plan, if those protests were part of the plan, we'd be seeing it. So that's just those are just my thoughts. It's interesting, and just to back to Murphy. I mean, he's really standing alone in this lockdown. Him, the mayor of New York, and maybe Newsom, I guess, and I think even the governor of Michigan, that crazy woman out there, has given up on really applying these mandates full course or full board. But we'll see. We got an election next week, and it's time to get Murphy out.
Yeah, you began your remarks by saying that he seemed to be encouraging the protests. And what was your point there?
Well, like there's a force acting on him that's saying you have to, we're going to use you to wake these people up. Okay. And he might not even know it. I mean, maybe this is getting too deep, but he might not even know it. If we think of Quigley's inner circle, okay, and these people on high, where the Grand Cabal is dictating terms,
You mean
it's almost like
Carol Quigley's secret establishment?
It's almost like somebody else has taken over that role and is trying to make Murphy really the patriot, the scapegoat here for fomenting a sort of a revolution within the state against that type of tyranny. I mean, because he doesn't have to do some of these things that he's doing. There's no political advantage to it. There's no electoral advantage. Everybody just is disgusted by it.
Give me an example. What has he done that everybody's disgusted by?
Well, I mean, he's mandating teachers to get vaccines. Yesterday on Veritas, it was just what he's kept hidden is his plans to bring to put to mandate school age kids get the vax. He's making sure that the state workers get the vaccine. Just about all the municipalities. He's putting the pressure on all these different groups to get the vaccine. Even though the governor has the support of the NGEA, the union, the union heads, he really is alienating a lot of the teachers, the rank and file teachers. They don't, some will go with the vax, but a lot of them don't want it at all. I mean, they're not going to, the union might say that they back Murphy, but really the rank and file, they're not going to vote for him, and they could care less what the union says. He's just angering. He's angering different constituencies that really shouldn't be angered if he wants to get reelected in next week. African Americans, he has a proposal supposedly on the table to start evicting renters, like if they don't get the vax, or maybe evicting renters in public housing. And a large part of that population are African Americans, and they're not falling for the vax. They've seen what happens when you get into when you acquiesce to government experiments. You wind up with the Tuskegee syphilis trials and all kinds of other eugenics experiments. So a normally reliable Democrat voting bloc, he's angering them as well. So there's a lot of moving pieces.
I'm sorry. I wanted to say, I just jumped in to say, does he have a choice? In other words, isn't it, the word from on high that you governors, shall make your people take the shot no matter what? In other words, why else would he be saying you have to take the shot unless he wants everybody to do it?
Because he seems to be standing alone in this at this point. I mean, you're not hearing this from the other states. He's not a bright guy either. Okay, whoever's whispering in his ears, he's probably never known who ultimately is whispering in his ears. He's not that big of a player. He's got the money, okay, but he was never part of that inner circle or that elite group. He's
okay. So let's look at the Republican side then. Well, who's running against him, and what do we know about the opposing candidate's position on these issues?
Yeah, I mean, right now it's a dog can run against Murphy if he had a Republican ticket, but Jack Ciattarelli has actually turned out to be pleasantly, surprisingly competent. There was a debate about 2 weeks ago, where he really did school Murphy in the non-necessity of any mandates, whether it's a vaccine mandate or a school mask mandate. He came across as pretty articulate. I was a little suspicious at first because he was backed by the Republican establishment here in the state, who have basically been sitting on their hands ever since Murphy started imposing these lockdowns and mandates. But Jack Ciattarelli seems to have a pretty good grasp of what the people don't want and what they do want. And really, everybody just wants to be left alone at this point.
I was going to say the days of voting for somebody that's going to give you what you want.
Yeah.
That forget that. That's
Yeah.
never happening. The only real issue left is whether you can get somebody that will not do the things that you don't want.
Right. Right. And everybody's
That's the only issue in the elections anymore is can we avoid disaster?
Jack would be a hands down winner. There's a couple of counties in this state though who reliably find ballots at 3:00 in the morning, and they've been doing it for 150 years. I mean, they election fraud was invented in Jersey City, and they're not going to give up that mantle.
Yeah. So who's Tony Soprano voting for?
Even Tony Soprano would definitely be a Jack Citarelli guy. Cool. It's but it's a machine. These machine politicians up in what's Essex County and Hudson County, where you have you have large populations up there, and that's when the votes show up, and that's where they show up. They don't show up down at the out in the burbs. That would be okay. That would be illegal.
So we feel maybe a little bit of hope then that Phil Murphy may be on his way out.
If there's no cheating, he's on his way out. I just don't I don't know if enough has been done to
see this
suppress the cheating.
I know. I mean, this to me, it could be a happy ending if New Jersey is successful in defeating Governor Murphy on the grounds that he is violating the Nuremberg Code and all of the other egregious executive orders and things that he's attempting to impose on what should be a free population. Maybe this will be a bellwether for the country. And yeah, I hear what you're saying, that he and New York and maybe one other state are kind of sticking out right now, but they're all on the edge. They would all, I mean, like right here in Maryland, Hogan would go back, in a heartbeat if he thought politically he'd gained something from it. And this is everybody's trying to say which way's the wind blowing, right? And if you look at the New York Times every day, at the bottom of the thing, it gives you a little count that says, the number of deaths is up or down, the number of cases up or down. Not that those statistics mean anything, but they do in terms of trying to predict what the program is, what's the narrative going to unfold next few days. And it looks like they may be wrapping up the COVID era. I hope so, except for now, what's next,
Right. Well, it's interesting. I find Murphy very interesting, and I'm trying to get more people to pay attention, or at least kind of hear me out. The Murphy comes from a very pedestrian Boston family, and he made some money at Goldman Sachs, and then he kept getting promoted, which means he did something. He did something right. There's definitely smart people at Goldman Sachs who probably deserve the millions or billions that they have just because they're that smart. And I've met these type of people. There's also the backslapping idiot who will do anything to make a buck. And I think that's who Murphy is. He just doesn't come across as a real intellectual, or would have some sort of novel product in the financial world, which would make the company a lot of money. Okay. I think what we used to call them quants. A quant would be a mathematical genius who could find a way to arbitrage some sort of extra cent out of some sort of trade and accumulate those because nobody else had thought of it, or nobody else had done the math to put the math in to really figure out how to do this. But Murphy doesn't have any math skills or special skills. He's not charismatic. He's a nobody. But his wife, this is where things get interesting and more into my territory of the historical research. His wife comes from Virginia Beach. Last name is Snyder. Her family tree forks in a couple different directions. In one of the areas that I thought was interesting relatively recently that was mentioned again, her mother is English. Her last name, the maiden name of her mother, is Medway. And this Jean Medway, she passed away, I guess, about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. maybe 3 years ago. Jean May was a runway model for a fashion designer named Hardy Ames, or Hardy Amies. Hardy Amies was the designer to the royal family post-war. Okay, he was he had a lot of influence on London fashion, just by the mere fact that he dressed Queen Elizabeth when she was in her 20s and just became the queen. So the Hardy Amies connection to Jean Medway, the Murphy's wife or Murphy's mother-in-law, is interesting in that Hardy Amies was recently, I think in the past 10 or 15 years, he worked for the Churchill's Secret Service. I think it's called the Executive Service, I believe it was, under Churchill. It was this really elite group of spies during World War II. And he's even rumored to have garroted some German officers while he was this man right here, while he was stationed in Germany, stationed in Belgium during World War II.
But he looks like such a nice guy.
He probably was.
I don't. Every time somebody says that word garroted, I go, it just gross me out. But okay. When you said the Churchill's executive, I wonder, are you referring to what they call the SOE, or the Special Operations Executive?
Yes.
So that's really an important. That's the top
Right.
of special ops in the world, because they're the guys that taught the OSS.
Right.
Yeah.
So this Hardy Amies, fashion designer, SOE.
Yeah.
Phil Murphy's mother-in-law became a fashion model. I don't know if she ever worked for SOE. She might have been too young to, but she was very closely connected to the Hardy Amies design house for a number of years, at least until I believe they moved to the States in the mid 1950s. Her father was an Air Force sergeant, I believe, and he was stationed in London where they met. But Hardy Amies goes on to consult with Stanley Kubrick on at least the movie 2001. And he might have consulted on a number of Stanley Kubrick's other projects, which I think, that gets you into the Eyes Wide Shut type of universe that none of us know about.
I don't know anything about.
Do you know the movie?
Yeah. I mean, I know enough to know that it's something I don't want to know.
It's supposed to be some, potentially autobiographical on the part of
Kubrick,
and he certainly would have traveled in those circles.
Yeah. And what's his name's in it? Those two are in it. Tom, what's his name?
Yeah, Tom Cruise and
Nicole Kidman. I mean, those two. I mean, come on. They've been, made into stars from the get-go.
Right. They're manufactured.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking out loud in that if there is a connection, a deep state connection, it goes through Phil Murphy's wife. There's a couple other connections there as well. Her father did open up the first MG dealership in the United States in about 1965 in the Virginia Beach area. And I've always considered it interesting that he decided to open up those dealerships. He started opening up other dealerships. I think there's 14 under the same name now. I think Checkered Flag Auto, I think it is, in Virginia Beach, Hampton Roads area. But he opened that up just as all those container ships started coming into Norfolk, sort of leaving from Norfolk for Vietnam and then coming back from Vietnam. And they probably weren't always empty containers. And it came at the cusp of the startup of the container industry that we know it today. And I think Norfolk, I think 1,200 containers were going to Vietnam each month, which meant 1,200 containers probably came back. And you have to wonder if there was anything in those containers that were passing through Norfolk, had a little bit of value on it, and maybe was illegal and needed to be run through a couple car dealerships. That's just speculation, but I find the timing interesting and sort of Bill Murphy's rise to riches is interesting in that context.
It is interesting. You've done a lot of work on that car dealership, and the way it extended around the country, and that is a suspicious situation there with those containers. What do you have any insight or thoughts about the container ships not being able to unload in Los Angeles? I'm baffled by this.
They're full of Chinese troops.
That's what I was afraid of. Yeah.
Nobody thinks.
I was thinking, oh no, they're just waiting for the signal. Come on, guys. Oh,
I think it's been delayed, and now they're just cooked
yeah,
Chinese troops. I mean,
yeah. They probably brought some, rice and stuff.
yeah, it's how long could that last though? I mean,
No, no, I know. No, okay. So what's
I,
you
I
know?
did think of that. I mean,
No, I don't know why it crossed my mind. It's just, I guess I have a suspicious type of mind, but I mean,
I noticed them off our coast.
George Webb's been predicting this for years. That
Right.
the Middle Eastern or Pakistan or wherever it's going to be on the East Coast, and
Right.
the Chinese are going to be on the West Coast, and then the Mavni people will come out of their hiding holes and come out, and between all of that, we'll be locked down and de-armed and
Right.
whatever else they want.
I
It's
did
a
think of that.
frightening image, but at the same time, I don't think that's what's going on either. But what the heck, half the people are saying, the supply chain is never going to be the same. It's going to be messed up all winter. Any insight into this, just from your background as a businessman?
I did notice. I noticed the containers a month and a half ago off our coast, on the East Coast, and we were in. Actually, was fishing in the main channel, the Ambrose Channel, 2 Sundays ago, and there was maybe 1 or 2 cargo ships coming in. They were on the move. So whatever happened in the New York area, there doesn't seem like a backup right now, at least in the Newark, the port of Newark, which is the biggest, which is where they would be heading for. They're still very unionized up in these ports. There's still a lot of union guys, and or they're controlled by unions. Now, the union guys probably could care less about helping the deep state, but I'm sure there's some union heads would be more than happy to slow things down, or would be required to slow things down if they had to. So if they're taking, if there's some grand plan to limit the amount of goods coming into the country, at least on the East Coast, you can maybe lean on the unions and slow things down. That would be my guess. There's not too many unionized non-state or non-federal unions left in New Jersey, but the port workers are one of those, and that might be some leverage. The rank and file union members would remain clueless or not be willing to participate if they knew what they were doing. But a union rep or a union head, that's always organized crime anyway. So.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the Italians. You mentioned Italy before, and I too am a fan of watching the protests that are going on over there in Europe on Twitter. I don't know where else to see it. Again, the mainstream media has just shut it out, and it's another sign of how serious they are about moving forward with their narrative and moving forward into whatever the next stage is. I don't think this is over by any means. Even if they let the COVID crisis pass, there'll be something else, and it'll be right around the corner. Winter is looking kind of sketchy right now. The economy's still purring along. They've still, got plenty of free money from the government to keep the stock prices up. And so I don't know. I'm just, every day I wake up and I look at the stock market and I say, my God, it's still up there. It's still there. It's like watching a magician with a magic trick with a ball up in the air and saying, how does he keep it spinning so long? Well, I don't know. It's crazy because they just keep pumping money in anyway, that's a different issue. What else you want to talk about
Well,
tonight, Bill?
somebody said on Twitter the Italians have or still refuse to observe the non-smoking in restaurants and outdoor cafes, and that rule's been in place for 30 years. So I don't know how you're going to get them to accept a jab.
Trieste.
Mhm.
I wanted to mention what I saw is said to be the biggest port in Italy, and it makes
Right.
sense that it would be. It's way up at the top of the Adriatic Sea, so that would give access to a lot of inland business at Milan and elsewhere. That port was completely shut down by pedestrians just going in there and standing around and occupying it. And
Right.
I think that's unions and workers. Is that still going on, or are you following that story?
Yeah, I believe it. It's whatever shows up on a Twitter feed. It was whoever, and sometimes I have to go search for it. Actually, it's probably been a few days since I looked for it, but I seem to have the right hashtags in place for whenever something does happen. I know in Genoa, uh, they did the same thing, and believe that's the largest port on the Mediterranean side of the
Yeah.
Italian peninsula, and then Milan certainly had some big protests, and I've been in that main square many times. Where not the monastery, the large church, for lack of a better word,
In what chapter?
the cathedral. It's a huge cathedral. It's a huge square, just like much like what you have going on there, but 3 times as big. You can get a lot of people in there, and it's just packed to the gills. You could probably get 200,000 people.
What square? What town are you talking about?
In Milan.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The square in Milan in front of
Duomo.
the Duomo.
The
Yeah,
Duomo, in front of the Duomo.
yeah, and what a classic place too.
Right, right. It's it's interesting. So
Yeah, well, my wife and I were there a couple years back when they used to let us travel.
right, right.
Nostalgic.
Yeah,
There they are.
that's
Yeah, I love it. I love seeing these films.
that's
The people out on the streets. Would Americans do that?
that's what I'm wondering. Would they do that? That's Emmanuel Boulevard, the named after the king, and it goes straight to the Duomo, and
Uh-huh.
it's pretty impressive. It's a big street.
Yeah,
So I think the Paris streets were widened by Napoleon so that uh, the people couldn't create roadblocks. When it was their time to riot. So I think a lot of the Italian cities were modeled after that, especially after Napoleon went through. It's widen the boulevard so that they can't create a create a redoubt or a fort and start hurling bricks at us, which you can pull
yeah.
up from the street anyway.
Well, that of course is an interesting issue in Washington D.C. As you probably know, we have all of these diagonal streets that are called avenues, and those are wide.
Right.
And the
Right.
main city streets will start it off one lane each way. They've somehow widened some of them, but the avenues are then intersected by traffic circles.
Right.
And there's traffic circles everywhere that are named after generals and stuff. And so, and the reason for that is to create a defensive barrier for the internal city to defend against armies that are marching down into the city, so that if they wanted to take one of those broad avenues, they'd run into a defensive barrier at the next traffic circle.
Right.
That was the thinking of city planners back in the 1800s.
That's interesting.
So,
I was going to say New Jersey has been getting rid of our traffic circles for 30, 35 years, 40
uh-huh.
years.
Well,
'Cause
these were
people,
traffic circles before there was
yeah,
traffic. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
this
yeah.
was just, an architectural feature to put a statue in it, and
Right.
but actually to create a military defensive barrier for people that wanted to invade, if anybody ever wanted to invade. The Civil War history around here is so fascinating, to think of how close the South really came to. Remember in 1863 when they had Gettysburg and everything, and
Mhm.
early or made that crazy run up to Carlisle. It was possible for them to have encircled the Yankee army and so separated them from the capital. And if they had done that, then the war would have gone completely different. Not that I'd want to see that,
No.
but it's so fascinating that things could have gone the other way. There's so many right down here, we have the old Confederate prison at Point Lookout, and there was like 15 or 20,000 Confederate soldiers down there, and all they needed was a ship to come along with some arms in it and set them free, and they would have sailed up the Potomac and took the city that way.
Right.
That those plans were made too. It just, you know, the timing didn't work out. It's too little, too late. Dollar late, you know, too little, too late
Right.
for the South, which is good for history, of course. You've been doing a lot of research. We've started off talking about Gibson Island a couple of years ago.
Hmm.
It's all tied together. I wonder if you'd want to grab some of your things from your deep state analytics blogs, or tell us a little bit more about how you would tie the Gibson Island research into the troubles that we're facing today. Any characters that you can trace historically from the island that might might make a good story?
Yeah, I mean, the web the web keeps getting closer and closer together. The components of it, and it's sometimes I think, well, maybe I, if I had the time and the money, I would run some sort of analysis on just randomly choosing 1,000 people and seeing how they're connected. Um, because there's almost so many coincidences and connections when you start to look at all these different conspiracies and cabals, especially just say from World War II on. But a, a couple interesting connections, and I've actually taken it home on this. Is there's Fort Monmouth is right near my house, and it's in Monmouth County, New Jersey, and it turns out Fort Monmouth was really a hotbed of spying, and it involved a number of different spy rings. And I've actually gone back and read some of the McCarthy hearing papers from the 1954 McCarthy Fort Monmouth investigation, and it's thousands and thousands of papers, so I can only do so much. But half the spies grew up in the town that I grew up in, and it's really not much of a coincidence that I am there. My father worked for my father when he joined the army in 1952. He was in the Signal Corps, and the headquarters for the Signal Corps was Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. My father was never stationed at Fort Monmouth, but when he did get out of the service and worked for various contractors over the years, he eventually wound up near Fort Monmouth as a contractor or working for one of the contractors, a number of different contractors. So, but Fort Monmouth is turning out to be I have a thesis on Fort Monmouth, and it gets back to Gibson Island. Um, there seemed to be a lot more going on there than really the electronic warfare of technology that they were working on. So you have this Fort Monmouth laboratories, or Signal Corps, U.S. Signal Corps laboratories at Fort Monmouth, and they're working on encryption devices and the early computers and radars and all this sort of high tech stuff from the 1950s. But I got it in I'm starting to think that there's probably a little bit more going on there on the psychological warfare and how it impacts us. Um, I believe in one of my essays, I had mentioned that I found a gentleman who was a contractor who ran this UFO, the premier UFO investigation society uh, back in the 60s and 70s, and he was right down the street from me. And they would go and investigate as a society these UFO encounters or what have you all over the world, and they put out a newsletter, and it was actually kind of a fascinating read. Um, the strangest connection that I'm coming across that I'd like to really nail down, but I'm getting I keep being frustrated by sort of the lack of documentation available on even census records or archived newspaper records. There's a gentleman who, I mean, this is going to go full circle on a couple different things. There's a gentleman who lived in my town, and he was a member of the Ford Foundation. You can see a couple of his a couple mentions of him in a local paper for dedicating library wings or hospital wings in the name of the Ford Foundation. This goes back to the 1950s. This gentleman had a wife named Alice Harrington, Alice Harrington Schmid. He was Robert Schmid. Alice Harrington Schmid opened one of the first humane societies in New York City that promoted sterilization of pets. This is 1957. Now, sterilization of pets was very novel in 1957. And it was novel because in 1954, the Humane Society of the United States broke away from the American Humane Society or American Humane Association because of the original's refusal to endorse spaying and neutering in pets on the grounds that it would lead to the spaying and neutering of people. But you have this money pouring into the neutering business in the second half of the 1950s, and this woman whose husband was a member of the Ford Foundation and the OSS before that, lived in town, and they were they were stationed, or their house is really just a 10-minute walk from Fort Monmouth, and I actually found a house too, and I'm just wondering if really there wasn't more going on at Fort Monmouth than just electronic warfare, but maybe this more Kabbalistic plan to promote transhumanism or eugenics disguised as spaying and neutering or sterilization. What also becomes interesting with this person, Robert Schmid, married to the Harrington, is he was on his honeymoon. He went to Germany with Alice in 1939, and there's articles from his hometown newspaper in Wisconsin in 1939 saying that he barely escaped in front of the Germans, but he was investigating for a dissertation. He was looking at the German youth groups, and German youth groups were very there was a number of political groups, but by 1939 the only one left really was the Hitler Youth Group. So it never says explicitly that he had contact with the Hitler Youth Group, but if you look at the documentation, most of the other competing youth groups, maybe the Catholic Youth Group, a Jewish Youth Group, they're almost like the Boy Scouts type of situations. They had all been eliminated because everybody's supposed to join the Hitler Youth Group, and so this person is writing a dissertation, and the dissertation is not published apparently. University of Wisconsin, but goes on to work for the OSS, then the Ford Foundation, and he's promoting this spaying and neutering and sterilization, which leads to the final thing that really got me interested in it was the Son of Sam killers. It's looking more and more like they had some intelligence connections, and there was always this dog sacrifice, and everybody had always wondered where these dogs came from. And I can't help but wonder where these dogs came from, the humane societies, and that the Son of Sam murders. There really is something to it, to the idea that David Berkowitz was not the lone murderer, and he was probably just a patsy, and that this occult connected, this cult, which is connected to intelligence, had a lot to do with the murders. You have a couple different things, all sort of forking coming in the same, funneling into the same type of holes. You see repeatedly. You see humane societies. You see intelligence. Cleveland Amory, as I wrote about, his brother was Robert Amory, headed the deputy director of intelligence during the Bay of Pigs. So Intel and this cult type situation, the Process Church also morphed into a humane society, the Best Friends Animal Society, and it's just it's odd, and I can't help but think that Fort Monmouth would have been ideal for this because it was a very, very wealthy area. Oh, you're sort of elite of the East Coast would have lived in the Fort Monmouth area, at least a lot of them during this 40s and 50s. And you have all this technology going in and out of Fort Monmouth, and it would be nice to abscond this technology and play your longer term game of population control and eugenics is what we're up to what we see today.
Oh, great. A couple points. First of all, let's just do a quick one. David Underdown, who will be with me tomorrow night, right here in the same spot here on Lives too, has a question. How far is Fort Monmouth from Princeton? Sarnoff Labs in Princeton, I think, became a lot of Stanford Research Institute. Stanford Research Institute that gets you right into your massive mind control research.
That's a good. Princeton, as a crow flies, is probably only about 30 miles. It's about a 15-minute drive. You can only go north south in New Jersey. You can't go east west. So Fort Monmouth, Princeton is actually very close to me, but you just can't get there from here. But yes, Sarnoff has been mentioned a number of times.
It's like National Harbor. It's very close, but you can't get there. There's 10-foot fences around the whole place.
There's no easy road to just drive across the state and be in Princeton. It seems like it's impossible. But Sarnoff Labs, yeah, the Princeton. Let me see if I have the name of it. There's another group. I'm not gonna be able to find it now, but there's another group that did the H.G. Wells investigation, or the experiment involving the War of the Worlds broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
Some believe actually the War of the Worlds was a project by this Princeton group. Let me see if I can find it. Others suggested maybe it was the Princeton group just did the the synopsis and summary version of it and the study of it afterwards, taking polls. They liked what they saw and they went to go learn more. Essentially, Sarnoff Group and Princeton are very, very close to each other.
Let's get back to dogs for a minute.
Sure.
My mind connects these things together. Your experience or your enlightenment about how the Humane Society, the original Humane Society, which basically was just there to help, was challenged by a breakaway, and the breakaway was done in order to accept money from the Ford Foundation through this man that you've identified, Harrington, and that all was part of a project to encourage people to get their dogs spayed or neutered, and I guess the same thing about cats, but bringing it forward to today. I mean, you and I, we've seen that psychologically it's a move toward allowing eugenics or allowing euthanasia, which is what the eugenics program from Cold Spring Harbor, New York, has been about, for 100 years. And so to psychologically affect people in such a way to say, well, we do it to dogs. So, I mean, I guess we can do it to people too, because, hey, dogs are mammals, people are mammals. And here's where we get to the real nitty gritty is, are people just mammals like dogs? Is that all we are? Because that's what they think. That is the thinking of the banking class, of the elite class, is that forget this God stuff and forget about spirituality. Life is here for you to live. Do it. Do what you will. Do what you want. And that. I'm sorry that image is distracting me. Thanks, Randy. I was trying to make a point that connects all these incidents together, that right now we are being told essentially to violate the Nuremberg guidelines, to say to people that, you've got to take this medication. We're not going to tell you what's in it. You're not entitled to ask. And if we tell you we fully tested it, you have to believe us because we're not open to question. And people are doing that. They're doing it right and left. They're saying, just like you said, if a man with a clipboard and a badge says do something, the people are going to do it. And this is still going on right now. And this ties in with a man whose last name is Oliver, a Scottish guy that I saw on Twitter today. He was so good, and he's identified that in the British government they have a squad called the Nudge Squad, which figures out how to change public opinion. And they want to nudge you this way or that way. And this is where you get to somebody like a Murphy who behind the scenes would say, yeah, we're going to go for the mandate. But
Mhm.
talking to his political consultants would say, oh, well, no, we're not going to tell them that. Are you kidding?
Right,
If I told them that, then they wouldn't vote for me. Are
right,
you crazy? So
right,
that is nudging. That is mind games, mind control over us. And these politicians are supposed to be working for us.
right, right,
So all of this is once more, it's all a consistent effort to use whatever tools they can to bend our thinking, to control our minds, both individually and as a population, to do their bidding without question. Sounds just like the plot that was hatched by Tupper Saucy's Jesuits back in the
mhm,
1600s. If you've had a chance to listen to any of that, because his prediction is that it is the Jesuits behind everything, and they've been working on this for hundreds and hundreds of years, and they're really really good at it. And so what they do is they manipulate you to do what they want to be done without you knowing that you're doing their will.
right, right.
And is that what's going on here? Are we all just being played, and have we been played our whole lives? And if so, I might get angry.
Yeah, I think I don't think we're being played anymore. I mean, I think the game we figured out the game. Yes, we've been played. We've been played. I would say we've been played up until 2017. At least that's when I've been played till. But now I think I figured it out, and it's not that hard to figure out. There's just some evil people. I mean, you know, if you just ignore the fact that people are going to call you a conspiracy theorist, they're going to call you a racist, just and you say, you know, that's over. We're not going to play that game anymore. You just because you don't agree, you can't go calling people racist or conspiracy theorists. Um, I would say that's why we're seeing this sort of acts of Murphy. It's almost like an act of desperation. You know, if everything was going swimmingly for them, then he could just really they could just keep coasting like they have been coasting for a past 100 years. Why accelerate this now? You know, you just boil a frog. They're not boiling the frog anymore. They're turning up the heat, and people are noticing. Um, you know, it's almost like, okay, we want people to notice, um, because without people noticing, there's not going to be action from the good forces, from the good guys. That's, I don't know. It's difficult to really say, but they've been doing this a long time. You know, what's the catalyst for really doing it so sloppily and so noticeably the past year and a
Desperation.
half? Desperation.
Desperate. They're desperate. They didn't get their Paris Accord money.
Right.
If we had just agreed to the Paris Accord, then they'd be getting all this money, and they wouldn't have had to pull the insurance policy on us. This is the insurance policy to get the money, because give us the money, Lebowski. Where's the money, Lebowski? That's what it, to me. I mean, it's not just a couple of evil guys. This is the whole banking system saying we've got to do this or else we'll lose our shirts.
Right. Right.
Well, that's just my opinion, but
Yeah.
I enjoyed your thoughts about Monmouth. I bought Joseph Farrell's book, McCarthy, Monmouth, and the Deep State a couple months back, and
Right.
did spend a couple of hours with it. He's kind of hard to read for me, but I don't. Have you seen that book? Did you?
I've seen a couple of interviews with him on Dark Journalist, which is a good show.
Uh-huh.
I think Farrell, he goes the UFO route too early and too soon.
Yeah, I
I,
can't.
the conspiracy, I don't think, is UFOs. It's weapons exfiltration, as George Webb has been saying.
Hmm.
And, you got to cover it up. You cover it up with a UFO.
Yep.
That's not what I would say. I think you might have written the other day on Twitter. There's you have President Kennedy, who was buddies with McCarthy, and Robert Kennedy was also friends with him. You have J. Edgar Hoover, who spoke about a conspiracy nobody else could possibly comprehend. You have Forrestal. You have a couple of these figures who all die early and mysteriously, including Forrestal, including McCarthy. I think they figured it out, and they figured out this is basically the Kuhn and Loeb network stealing stuff and running drugs, and all these guys had to be taken out for it, and within that you have the whole. It's almost like everybody. There's a lot of occult talk. There's a lot of eugenics talk. I would think it's ultimately it's really just money. The eugenics talk is for you to be able to get somebody to do something that will advance your money goal. The occult talk is because people like Hillary are too stupid to figure out what a balance sheet means, but you can get her to bomb a village in Syria for Moloch or something like that. But it doesn't really go anything other than they just want the money, and whether it's drugs or trafficking or weapons sales, illegal weapon sales, and all that other stuff is sort of the side issues and distractions, and what you do with the Hillarys of the world who have power but are too stupid to do anything with it.
Yeah, money, 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 and money talks, and it dehumanizes everything. It just turns everything into dollars and cents. How can I make money off of you today?
Right.
All right, Bill, this has been very interesting. I enjoy it always, and thanks for joining us tonight. Tonight at 10:10 p.m., I'm told, Andy DeBala's show continues live with Andy at Neighborhood News Hour. And although they lost 3 channels today, they did not lose the Andy DeBala Live with Andy channel. So be sure and tune in at 10:10 p.m. tonight. Anything else you'd like to add, Bill?
Vote for Jack Citarelli.
Okay. Vote for Jack Citarelli, and let's
Citarelli.
oh, how do you spell it? S.
Cittareli. One fact about Italy, they don't have spelling bees in Italy because everything sounds exactly the way it's spelled.
Sounds good to me. Okay, well, thank you again, and good night, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow evening with David Underdown right here. Good night.